Hello and welcome to the Comedian's Paradise. This is the podcast where we speak to comedians and clowns from across the globe with fantastic, amazing, scintillating, and stories that are terrifying us. Now, today's guest is a legendary clown, all the way from San Francisco, in the same place as the comedic great Robin Williams. He is a clown connoisseur. He helped. He's been in Cirque du Soleil. He's been casting clowns for Cirque du Soleil for over 10 years. He is a man who's also helped bring clown to serious and miserable accountants and made them smile and have personality. He is a man who cannot. There's nothing he can't do. Please welcome a man that has the first name of like Jeff Bridges and Raz, the surname that is perfect for rapping. Please welcome Jeff Raz.
Oh, thank you. That was a great introduction. I've actually shared a stage with Robin Williams one time, and he was as amazing as he seems to be. Yeah.
Is he as like how much prep does he have to do to be like? Because when you watch him in interviews or when you watch him in all sorts of different things, it just seems it's so effortless for him. It just comes out of nowhere with these characters, the body movements. He's probably not even aware of what he's doing, and like he was just naturally good at it, wasn't he? I don't know. I don't know the full story,
Yes,
but
there's no doubt. There's no doubt he had a flow that was unstoppable. I think he prepped a lot for that flow, but he also, when an audience was there with him and he was going, it was hard to stop. As a matter of fact, I used to do a show with a school group, and we did our final performance at a huge theater, a 3,000 seat theater in San Francisco. And Robin Williams' ex-wife was one of the producers, so he volunteered to do the show, to do an opening for the show. 3,000 people is a great thing to have Robin Williams. He brings them in. Whoopi Goldberg did it. We had a lot of good folks, and we had 1,000 kids in the show. So there's another guy, an opera singer, and I were the through line folks, and we were playing two janitors. And Robin Williams' ex-wife says, one of you needs to stop Robin at the beginning, or else he'll take up the whole time and no one will get to dance. We said, oh. He said, no, all you do, come on as janitors, take the microphone and just keep walking. Just don't stop walking. We flipped a coin and the other guy lost, Randy Eckert. And so I got to watch Randy sweep across the stage, take Robin Williams' mic mid-gag. The audience went, oh. He went, and then he got it and very graciously found his way off. But he was in the middle of a role. The audience, he would have gone for the next 2 hours and 1,000 kids would have sat backstage. He was that good. The audience was enthralled and could have sat for another 2 hours.
Did you get to see how he worked beforehand as well?
By then, he was so famous that he went into neutral. Like he and I had a bit together in the show, but we hadn't rehearsed. It was just someone said, here, do this. And I had an idea for the bit and I went over to talk to him and he just, because he had, at that point, so many people were coming at him, even backstage, he had to have, so I didn't get to see, what he was doing at all.
Is it a common thing? Because I know there's a famous comedian interviewer called John Fleming. He says that, like Malcolm Hardy, he was a well-known British nutter on stage, and like on stage he'd do anything, but in reality, off stage he's quite shy. And I feel that with comedians, performers, sometimes we're outlandish and crazy on stage when there's a camera or something in, but off stage, I include myself in this, we can be a bit awkward or a bit timid. That's like a side of us that gets expressed, but in reality, we have our other side.
I do think that's part of Robin Williams. Also, a guy named Jeff Hoyle, who is a brilliant, brilliant performer, British guy who moved here. Incredible Commedia dell'Arte performer, incredible clown, incredible actor, all the way. And he's really shy. As a matter of fact, for the longest time, I thought he really didn't like me at all. And then we shared a dressing room for a benefit show. And I just realized, oh, he's really shy off stage. The craziness, and he brings high level skilled craziness in a physical way, the way Robin Williams did in a verbal way. And but yeah, he was just shy.
But is it fun? Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? The contrast. And
Yeah.
do you feel that as well yourself? Like when you're, or you feel like you're,
I'm not so crazy on stage, and I'm not crazy off stage. I definitely need time to decompress. When I'm working, like I did with Cirque du Soleil, sometimes we were doing 10 shows a week. I was playing the main character, so I had 13 in circus. You call them entrances, so I had 13 entrances, so 13 acts. Some of them short, some of them longer, and 2 shows a day. It's a 2-hour, 40-minute show. Circus folks tend to sleep between shows because I do a lot of acrobatics. I was 50 when I started, so I wasn't doing a lot of acrobatics, but I would still need to just days off, don't go out, recalibrate.
and these shows, from what I heard from your interview with Barnaby, they're 2 hours long, right?
The show I was in with Cirque du Soleil, Corteo, was 2 hours 40 with a 30-minute intermission. They had a long intermission because there was a lot of people and people wanted to buy a lot of stuff. So, but the running time was 2:40.
Did you get involved in, like, do you also sell the food and drinks yourself as the performers? Because I saw that in Cirque Borman that they do that. No.
There's a long tradition of that in circuses, and I've done that often with other circuses. With the Pickle Family Circus, for example, we were on a tour in 1993 around the country, ending at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C., a very reputable place. But the show went bankrupt the first couple of weeks out. We had a 3-month tour. So we ran the show on our own. So everybody was out selling. The best sellers were our Chinese performers. One woman, Zoyue, contortionist, she would stand on the merch table, but she would only sign something if she thought she'd spent enough money. And she was so charming and so funny that she made us a lot of money.
Did she stay in North America as well?
No, she had a back injury and she had a bad fall in a show. It was luckily the last show of a different tour, but she's now a very wealthy woman with a big company in China. She does a lot of exports.
So this is an experience that I had recently myself, and this is something I want to look into. But how important is the mental side for performers, and also how can an injury affect a performer like it does in sports, like they say in boxing or MMA? Once they get knocked out, or once that they're not the same fighter. As a performer, I did a backflip in Matteo Destro, and my ankle fell in the funny angle, and it had a bit of a funny effect to me afterwards. But now I can
What
finish with the
happened?
ability to walk.
Yeah. So did it heal?
I can now jog. I was in sort of late March, and the guy was supposed to catch from behind. He did catch me, but my ankle fell in a funny angle. I couldn't walk for a few weeks, and then what? I had some other stuff happen there as well. There's some people were a bit funny towards me there, but that's not important. The main thing was, yeah, I can jog now. I can't yet sprint, but I'm going to build it up in a couple of weeks. So now I'm in a place where I appreciate it. I
Yeah.
appreciate being able to run. At least now, if there's a fire, I can survive.
This is why I have a car. But yes, I got it. Well, injuries are part of circus. I mean, you were doing a backflip, you were doing a circus trick, and it happens, small ones, big ones. I don't. Some people, like for Zoe, she was done. She'd been an acrobat since she was 7. It wasn't a big life choice like it is here in the U.S. and probably in the U.K. It wasn't like this is what I'm gonna do, and maybe my parents are speaking against it. It was she was in a school, and Louis, who was my trainer too, head of the Nanjing acrobatic troupe, said, she's good, let's go. So she started training 8 hours a day. She was essentially an employee of the state, employee of the Chinese government as an acrobat as a child. And she was very good. She and Louis had a great relationship. The rest of her cohort of performers were like brothers and sisters. But she was done. She was in her 20s and kind of done and was on to the next thing. So for her, it wasn't life-threatening physically or mentally. I've had a lot of injuries, and I actually saw my old chiropractor the other day, and one of my favorite human beings. He kept my career alive for an extra 5 years.
Did you pay him extra? No.
No, I gave him a hug when I saw him this time.
That's but how did you so what was it, how did you feel when you got okay again with the injury, and how was it to actually, I mean, to see someone you know, and then as you're injured and then you're getting better again? How was that?
It happens all the time. Like, I don't think I've ever in my younger years, when I was doing I did a lot of acrobatics, juggling, and clowning together for many years, 20, 25 years. I haven't done it intensely for a long time. But I was always injured. It's like they talk about athletes, professional athletes. You're always injured. You just hope it's less. I was talking about that show at the Kennedy Center. Warming up the day before in the Kennedy Center, I was catching 3 highs off of a teeter board. So someone's standing on my shoulders and someone is flipping onto their shoulders. And the guy on my shoulders is Russian, and the guy flipping onto his shoulders is Chinese, and the two of them are not talking to each other. They're talking to me, like, tell the Chinese guy this or tell the Russian guy that. But they're standing right there. And they just couldn't land the trick in rehearsal. These are both top level acrobats. They just were pissed off. And the next morning I couldn't stand. I woke up, I'm brushing my teeth on the floor, and I'd torn all the ligaments in my left hip. And I had to do the show. They called me Hoppy the Clown because my left leg fell asleep for 6 months. So I didn't know where my left leg was. So I'm doing choreography in the dance bit, and there's a leg moving around, and I'm not short. I'm pretty tall. So my legs are long. There's a long leg moving around. So it's terrible because you got to rework everything. You're not at your best. You can't do some of the big tricks. You have to lean on other things, which you grow when you lean on other things. But yeah, when you finally can feel a little bit whole again, it's a nice feeling.
Does it affect your confidence, or does it affect your, like, when you interact with people, did it get in the way?
No.
Okay.
No. I mean, I've been performing professionally for 52 years. And I started as a street juggler. If your confidence can get shaky as a street juggler, you don't eat very much. And I like to eat a lot.
Fair enough.
I mean, it's really true. When you're street, I don't know if you've street performed, but right, you if you don't make the money, your lunch really depends. And if that hat is light, it's very visceral and very immediate, and you learn to stay with it if you want to pay the rent and eat.
Yes. Well, okay, that's a very straightforward.
It is. We toured Europe. This group I had in the 80s, Vaudeville Nouveau. We toured Europe in 85 for 3 months, excuse me. And we lost a gig in Southern Italy. We had a 3-week tour in Southern Italy. A theater burned down, and the government closed all the theaters as a reaction. So we went to London, and we went to Covent Garden, and we managed to get on the list there. And I don't know if you've ever done that, but you get there at 6 in the morning or something. You put your name on a list. Everyone goes out and has tea and breakfast. You come back, and you tend to spend the day there watching. We had to retool our approach to the audience to fit the audience's expectation, but also our new colleagues. You know, there's an expectation. You're now a group there. You're taking care of each other. But what everybody had there and what everyone has here in San Francisco is you have to have that confidence. You just can't go out there and build a crowd and then get some money at the back end without having that confidence. And yeah, there's no way around that.
Yeah. And when do you notice any differences between clowns and jugglers as a whole?
Oh,
Or
sure.
you see them as the same sort of kettle of fish?
No, 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 no. There's a totally different. I mean, when I was young, I was a good juggler. I learned when I was 14, I was a good juggler. I was working professionally the next year. I was one of the best club passers in the Bay. You know, I was good. I had chops, and I wanted to be here as a juggler. And then when I started doing clowning, inspired by Bill Irwin, I know one of the questions you're going to ask about. Bill Irwin was my great hero. Okay, so I'm also doing acrobatics and I'm doing comedy, and I wanted to be the best at all of those. And someone who was quite a bit older said, you might want to choose. You're not likely, you have to do different things to be the best in all of those, and you just don't have enough hours in the day. And I thought they were wrong, which was good because I worked really hard. But like a solo juggler, you're working by yourself 6 hours a day to keep your chops up if you're doing a solo act. And it's a kind of lonely existence. There's a guy, John Gilkey, who was a fabulous solo juggler and now has become a top drawer clown, using the discipline he learned as a juggler, which I use too, the discipline you learn as a juggler and an acrobat. He was also an acrobat, to help with your clowning. But it's they're just the way your days are structured are really different.
Okay. And speaking of like Bill Irwin, like who are like your clown heroes and what is it about them that makes them your heroes?
Well, Bill, have you watched Bill Irwin in any setting?
As a stand-up, I'm sorry, man, I haven't.
It's so interesting, isn't it, that you know we're both in comedy, but there's people you mentioned, I'm sure I don't know. So Bill Irwin has gone on to be quite famous. He started it in clowning he went to Ringling Clown College. He didn't accept a contract from Ringling to go professionally tour with them, and came out here. And he'd also been a dancer and been doing theater at Oberlin College. He moved, and still does, beautifully. That, like, as a baseline, he just moved beautifully. He does some eccentric dance. So at that level, I just was there. And he's funny. He's really, really funny. So he's working with the Pickle Family Circus with Jeff Hoyle, who I mentioned, and Larry Pizzoni, who started the Pickles with 2 other people. And they were funny. It was like they were reworking this whole idea of clown entrees, little stories told by a group of clowns. And I was lucky he was my hero, first of all, because he's really good. And I would always, like, the Pickles let me bounce on their trampoline to work on some of my moves, and I'd always happen to schedule it while Bill was rehearsing. And so I got to see how hard he worked. Like, I remember he's a tap dancer, and he was working this thing in the mirror, and I'm, bounce, 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 whoa. And he goes, Jeff, how does this look? And I went, great. And he goes, no, and goes back to work. And I said, that's why he's so wonderful and spontaneous on stage or in the ring, because he works that hard and he works with that level of intensity. But I could never be like him. I'm a tall man. I'm also a big man. And but I took a lot of dance classes because he was my hero. So it helped me be the big guy who's holding a lot of weight and basing, but moves well. I never will move like Bill. I never did. But that was a lucky thing for me that I fell in love with his work.
But for being inspired by him, it can help your own work. You can take a little bit from
Right.
people you admire and build your own thing.
There are some of my ex-students and here in the Bay Area who do move really well, but they're a generation younger, so they weren't in awe of Bill because he'd already moved to New York. If I could have moved like him, I might have been in danger of being, you know, Bill Jr. or you know, trying to be him. I just couldn't. There was no possible way, and that was lucky.
But so there's two things, and this is gonna I don't know where it's gonna go, but this is I yeah, I think I definitely believe that for us to get better with anything we do, we have to take inspiration from other people and take
Yeah.
bits and pieces. But the thing that, and we've got to build our own thing of that. One thing that I do find in stand up, I do, and other parts of life is I find that people will occasionally, when they copy, they will copy, but they try and be that person, and that
Okay.
bit is what I'm a bit against. And I've seen that also in people in terms of you'll witness it where someone will copy that person and then they'll try and one up them. But the thing is, find your own thing, mate.
Yeah. You're saying yes, you're exactly in tune with what I was saying. I would have been in danger of trying to copy Bill. And if I could have, I just, there was no, if I tried to copy Bill, I was still being myself because our bodies and our sensibilities are so totally different. So that's what I mean by, yes, exactly that. I didn't fall into that trap.
But have you seen that sort of danger happen with other artists?
Oh, sure. Some in clowning, a lot in street performing. The same thing we were talking about where you're so, you have this confidence and this deep connection with the audience because you're getting paid after the show, not before the show.
Okay.
And that's a big deal. When you get paid is a big deal. But the other thing is that I find as a street performer, you get pretty conservative because if you see the person before you or after you and they're getting twice the hat you're getting, and you're going, God, maybe I'll just try that last trick they're doing.
Uh,
And then you try and I'll tell you, there's another guy here. You sent me a question about a really crazy performer, Frankie Olivier. So I grew up with him in Berkeley. I'm 4 years older, so he was like the kid juggler. He invented a bunch of tricks that people think are standard. Like there's a whole routine on a tall unicycle where he gets people out of the audience and he's climbing all over them. Well, it's like in the repertoire right now, but Frankie actually is the one who did that. And that tour of Europe I was saying, he happened to be about a week ahead of us, maybe 2 weeks. And he used to do some tricks, like he'd take a juggling club and he'd spin it on his head, or doing what they call devil sticks, and he would spin them in a flat thing and he'd say the helicopter. Just a simple sight gag. Well, we're in Amsterdam and we knew he'd been there because there's a guy doing a different trick having nothing to do with spinning, saying the helicopter. He didn't speak enough English to understand that a helicopter, that was the gag. So and we wrote a note to Frank. He said, hey man, and he goes, yeah, that happens all the time. People don't understand what the joke is, so they just copy what they're seeing. But the joke is either the setup that happened 5 minutes ago or the way you do it here. And so it ends up being, like you say, a kind of flat copy.
hmm. And what, with all of those experiences you've had as a performer, how did it shape you individually? Like, what are have you seen Slumdog Millionaire?
I haven't seen it, and it's been
Okay.
out for a long time.
So to cut the story short, he, have you seen Who Wants to Be a Millionaire in the
Yes,
American or the English version? So he
I've seen the
played
US version. Yeah.
the Indian version of that. That's the film,
Okay.
and he found all the answers to the questions because of his life experiences. That what led him there. What what of like the five either performance experiences or life experiences that have shaped the way you approach clowning?
I like that. I'm going to dig in and try to remember. When I was in theater school at Dell'Arte in a small town in Northern California, I had already been performing for 5 or 6 years. And I felt like, God, I'm not good enough. And I wasn't. So I went to theater school and I was really clueless at theater school. They gave me 2/3 of a diploma at the end. But luckily I took a lot of notes. But I remember a moment where we were doing a show outdoors in the plaza in a tiny town called Arcata. And I was supposed to be on the phone. It was a little play we were doing. And a fire engine comes by. And I do what a street performer. I said, hold on a second. Hey, could you keep it down, please? Thank you. And went back to the phone call. The head of the school, in the talk back afterwards, took credit for that. You see, I've taught Jeff how to be in the moment. And I said, God, no, I haven't learned a thing yet. I mean, I didn't know that then, but I was a terrible student. But I did take notes. But that I learned from street performing. And that I use, that idea of you're right here. What's happening is happening. It's all happening right here becomes, to me, really a key. So I would take that as one.
Okay.
I would say learning to, I worked in a trio that I was mentioning that took this European tour. We worked together for most of a decade. And we had a tight juggling acrobatic music comedy show. And I was the number 3. So the number 1 thinks they know what's going on. They're the leader. The number 2 is kind of in between, and then the 3 is the crazy one. So I'm the guy who gets to be in the chicken outfit. And I loved it because the rhythm, it always came back to me. And if we did it right, I was set up. And we were performing in Germany in this Rathaus in the square in Hamburg. And there was a gag we did where I'm stuck between 6, there are juggling clubs around me. And I walk in and then one of them had dropped my pants. So I got this funny underwear. And so I have to lean down as the clubs are going around and get my pants back on while the clubs are flying. And then I take the clubs. So I lean down and I end up turning around, right? So my butt's to the audience. And as I'm turning around, I hear the audience go, oh, and it gets really quiet and weird. And then my partner stop juggling. And I stand up and there's a guy who had been heckling us in English. He was American, but he spoke German. He was heckling us in English and then switching to German to translate for the audience. He dropped his pants, but he didn't have any funny underwear. And I would say at that moment, I realized that you better be bringing something to the stage because, their show was gone. The funny underwear is not funny anymore. We've seen a guy with his, privates hanging out there in the middle. It's just like, whoa. And my girlfriend was our stage manager and she was sitting in the front row. Maybe we weren't getting along and she was going, now that's funny. That is funny. And I was like, oh man. So there's something about the humility of, we worked really hard on this. People around the world love this. It's funny. Some drunk guy just pulled down his pants and you're nothing. Mm. I'm not sure I gained from that, but I certainly remember it vividly. I take number 3 is I switched from when I joined the Pickle Family Circus. I was replacing someone else who was the number 1 of a 2-person routine. Okay. So my partner's Diane Wozniak in that show is very tiny and very good acrobat. So I had to retool how I was on stage. She was going to get most of the laughs. So how do you set her up and make sure that you are doing that other role in a comic partnership while doing acrobatics, while playing music, while juggling? And we had themes and storylines. So the clowns were responsible for keeping that storyline going. That was a great education for me. I would say when I joined Cirque du Soleil, so I ran a school for 10 years, the Clown Conservatory, and I was invited to take a lead role in Corteo because they had brought me in with my choreography teacher, my dance teacher from the school, to work with the company. It was a new show then, and they wanted some work on how to connect with the audience. Most of the performers were athletes. And if you think about it, an Olympic athlete does the exact opposite of a performer. An Olympic athlete tunes out everything so they can focus on this one move. Think of gymnastics, for example.
Yeah.
On a circus performer, you're completely tuned in and you're doing a much lower move. No one's scoring you 1 to 10. So you're probably doing a move that's way lower on your skill level, but you need to do it with pizzazz. So I was working with him, and it turns out I looked a lot like the guy who had the lead role, and he was leaving, and so they invited me. So I went to do that. In terms of a theatrical challenge, it was not a huge theatrical challenge. It was a challenge working with a group that big. There was 60 so people in the company. It was a challenge working with a huge company. And it was really a challenge to follow the director's concept, even when I was right and he was wrong.
Ooh.
Now, the director was not there on tour with us, but my artistic director, who's a guy named Richard, who had been a ballet dancer, he and I got along really well, partly because we knew we had to. And we got a deal going where he would give me a note and I would try it no matter what I thought, which was really good for my ego. Like, dude, yes, you think you're the big shot. You teach clowning, you're doing this lead role, do what Richard said. But their deal was, if it didn't work, we would talk about it and probably wouldn't go. And it worked great because I learned stuff from a dance point of view that I could use in clowning that I never would have tried. He always was like me, wanting to work on a new thing every show. What's the tweak we can make? And that partnership was a beautiful thing for me. And I'd never quite had that, because you usually don't have your director there every day. 500 shows, and I'd say we tweaked. Well, I'd certainly tweak something every show, not change something every show. A little, just often trying to get to what the director was looking at, which is really different than what I thought should happen.
And with those 500 shows, were they all in like big? Oh, bloody hell! Yeah. So what, for a whole year, or like?
I did a year. That was 385 shows in a little over a year in the US. And then I was done. That's all the contract. I had 2 small children at the time. But then someone was in illness, and so they brought me back to Japan to do it in Japanese for 3 months, and then I came back again. There was another emergency. I came back for another month or so.
I'm sorry to say this, but I've not seen Corteo. I don't know much about it, but
I knew you hadn't, because you asked me and then you sent the email. I said, so tell us about Corteo. I said, oh, yeah.
But is it mostly a sort of a physical thing, more so on like universal things rather than like specific references? Like you see a lot of stand-ups. What makes their jokes funny is specific references and the meanings of those references that make them funny. You guys will perform, I don't know, a thing on stage, and someone get kicked in the balls. And if someone gets kicked in the balls, or if someone gets slapped and falls over, that's universally funny.
Clowning is both. You're absolutely right that in the stand-up world and in sketch comedy, situation comedy, and so it's really hard to export that. Trevor Noah managed to figure that out, but that's hard. Acrobatics, juggling, way over here. Often nonverbal, usually can take the exact same act and tour it anywhere. Clowning, we're probably here. We're trying to get stuff that can ring everywhere, but you need to make adjustments. A Japanese audience is pretty different from an American audience. But Cirque du Soleil likes a very amorphous world. Like, I found out after I'd been working with them for a long time that there was some controversy in the front office after I started, because the director told me, you're on an American tour, you're the lead character, speak American English. And I was a little surprised, because I'd learned from the Italian guy. So I was doing exactly it was about 8 pages of dialogue. I was doing it with an Italian accent, because I thought that's what he wanted. He goes, no, do it in American English, which bizarrely ended up being hard, because I'd memorized it with an accent, and Richard had to keep giving me notes of, you said that sentence and you sounded suddenly Italian. That was weird, and I wouldn't even notice it. But then when we switched it to Japanese, I don't speak Japanese, but I got a tutor who got me going on it. The rhythms were different. Japanese is a really specific language. Japan is a totally different culture. They were loving the European feel of it. So we weren't trying to do a Japanese show. So how do you be an American clown speaking Japanese? It's a great challenge. So that's why I put us here, not way over here where you and other folks who are making really specific references, but not here with the acrobats either, where doesn't matter where we are. That, we do that triple with a half turn and catch it, and everybody goes crazy no matter where they are.
Why is it that clowning is, maybe you should explain it, but why is it that clowning has to be in between and can't be?
Because we are the relationship with the audience.
Okay.
In a circus, my acrobatic teacher, Louis, used to say that circuses are three things. They are wow, that great acrobatics. They are humor, and they are teamwork. That's what makes a circus. And the humor is the exhale. So people see an and then and they exhale. So that breathing rhythm is a core to a circus. To get the inhale, it's just it can be just amazing, and it can be the same amazing in many different cultures. The exhale, the specific exhale, which is usually around a connection, needs to adjust a bit depending on where you are. You need to really be connected to the audience.
And to be connected to the audience, you've got to understand the culture. You've got to understand who they are. And the way to connect with people, you've got to relate to people. And if you can't talk about things and that's the thing. This may sound different to you, but one of the things my previous guest on the podcast, as a comedian, one of the things that a lot of comedians do is we become too insulated being with just comedians, and that affects our ability as performers to regular audiences, because if we can't relate to them, we can't. It's 10 times harder to be funny than if we can't relate to them or connect with them.
Yes, that's I would say very much exactly the same with clowns and comedians. And but as a clown in a circus setting, I always say I want to do the pre-show. In some lingo, it's animation, but the pre-show is for me. I'm feeling the audience. I'm getting connected. I'm opening my heart to them. And then when I make my first entrance, they've seen me. They know me. Oh, that's my friend. That's why, and I always want to do transitions. If props need to be moved, I'll do it. Because I want to be back. I want to be with them as much as possible. I'm their buddy. With Corteo, I was playing a dead clown. Corteo is a funeral cortege. So I opened dead on stage. And the pre-show, what they called animation, was looking for my body. So I couldn't very well join in. And I was one of the only people there who knew anything about doing animation. So I'm lying there pretending to be dead on stage, critiquing. Oh, God, that's not good. And then I would fall asleep sometimes because the lights were hot. And one of the Russian acrobats, I had a deal. If I breathed evenly, I'd get an elbow and come back to life. But in Japan, I knew I had no choice. In the U.S., I could fake. I've toured the U.S. I could do that. I could get the audience in my first entrance and have a pretty good idea. But Japan, so I would sneak out in full costume, and we had these tunnels where we went, and I could watch the audience come in, and I'd see a woman in her 90s, and there are a lot of women in their 90s in Japan, and I would walk out, and I'm 6'2". I come out, I put my arm out, and most women would just like, of course, a giant American clown leads me to my seat. That's what I always do. They'd put their arm through, and I'd take her to her seat, and then sneak back before I got caught. And that was so I just kind of hold her in my heart. And the rest of the show, I was just thinking of her and, I'd feel what was coming from the audience, and I got used to it after a while. But it's different. Like, it's the same idea, but it's more of an energetic and a timing thing for clowns, not necessarily changing the perspective of a joke or Maybe it's timing for you too, but that's the crucial thing for us, I think.
No, I think what you said there about timing, I think it's completely with. No, yeah, I think definitely more of clowning, but with the best comics, it's definitely the same. With comics who are just focused on just the words and mediocre, maybe not as much, but the ones that I've seen that are very, very good, I'd say it's just the same.
This may be on a tangent, but you asked about the stand-ups that have inspired me or clowning. So Richard Pryor and Lily Tomlin were the two I came with. Now, Lily Tomlin really did solo shows because Jane Wagner wrote a lot of her pieces, but she was so physically engaged and she was so much about timing. Richard Pryor, who got his changed his career in Berkeley when I was there. I didn't see him back then, but so physical, like the heart attack. And he embodies the characters, the neighbor's dog. So that's all really clowning. And Richard Pryor also, both of them can go, they don't need to have laughs. Like if you're watching one of Richard Pryor's, like one of his live movies, the famous ones, and I don't think if you're counting laughs per minute, which I know they do in clubs here, I don't know if you're going to get a number you're going to be happy with, because he'll go 2, 3, 4 minutes and he's happy not to have a laugh if it's getting heavy. Same with Lily Tomlin. So that there's a formula I got from my teacher, the one I was talking about earlier at theater school, Carlo Mazzoni Clemente. So comedy is 49% tragedy, 51% comedy. That's what, and Pryor and Tomlin really embody that. And I like to try to work in that world. I wrote a solo play in the 90s about the Holocaust and my father's suicide. And there were a lot of laughs in that play. And the laughs were bigger because people were here. And the laughs were on the point. There's a thing where you can sort of, let's throw a rubber chicken in. That's not the laughs. The laughs were staying in the tragedy and finding the humor there. Yeah.
And I think this is a thing that's similar with stand-up and clowning, is that you build the tension and then you break the tension.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes we don't have to build the tension if the acrobats have built the tension.
Yeah.
If people have been watching and like this, we come on and sometimes you just step on and, oh, thank God. And you get that laugh of recognition. Oh, my friend. In Europe, there used to be here we are again as the clown entrance, some version of that. My friends, but also, oh boy, I can exhale for a while now.
And how do the routines with all those 500 performances, how do you keep it fresh and exciting? I know that with comedy, there's a thing that a comedian, I'm not going to say what his name, but he said when he's doing the same bit again and again, he will either do it in a different pace or he will change different words in it to keep trick his body into saying it's a new piece of material. What do you guys do when you're doing the same bit again and again that works, but you create life into it and make it seem fresh?
Yeah. A huge, and as you know, a really important question. I've got a few answers to that. I've also been a union actor for 40 plus years. So I'm used to having to do the same show over and over again with text. So there's an idea that comes from the clown, Avner the eccentric, that is an absolute key to acting as well, which is be interested, not interesting. So when you're acting, if you're acting in an ensemble play, you just stay really interested in the other people. And every night they're a little different. And so you're using that core skill of being present, grounded here, and you're listening and you're genuinely reacting. You're not reacting as if. what the comedian you were talking about, it's like they're doing their lines as if I was here. But I'm not all here. I'm on automatic pilot. And so he's trying to change up, or she's trying to change up to get themselves present. In clowning, presence is in some ways the art. If you're not present as a clown, I'm probably not so interested in watching. And so, and it's the relationship between you and the other performers and you and the audience. In a solo show, or if you're clowning on stage alone, in the solo show, I've done 3 or 4 solo shows. I listen to myself when I'm the other character. When I have 2 characters talking to each other, I just listen carefully to what they just said and be sure I'm responding to the guy who was just here, who just happened to be me. But also with the audience. I'm always feeling with the audience. With clowning, you've got to be 100% with the audience. You got to be 100% with whoever you're working with on stage. You got to be 100% in this moment, in the spotlight, with the music, 100% on your tricks. It's a lot of 100%. So all the work you do is to be there, clearly there. And when you can do that, an audience knows. I don't know if this is always true. I have found that when I am genuinely there in that deep way, an audience just is with you. Oh, I'm sorry. I had one other answer. Sorry, I didn't have to interrupt. When I was doing Corteo, that was worrying me because it's, someone else's show. I didn't have a lot of room. So I did this thing where I was running a school, as I mentioned, for professional clowns. And I thought, okay, why am I going to do Cirque du Soleil while I'm running a school? Well, 1, it's kind of good publicity for the school. Okay. 2, I need a break. And I thought I was stopping performing, and this is a great way to step back into the profession. 3, I get to try to do what I teach my students in front of 2,800 people every day, twice a day, most days. So I took this and I took my curriculum with me, and I was still running the school from my laptop at night. I had people there, lots of great people, but I was still the director. But I would look through the lessons and I would think, okay. And first of all, I found a lot more sympathy for my students. Like, Chef, what the hell does that mean? Some idea that I would share with my students beautifully, and then I'd have to go do a show. And it helped me immensely to be a student of myself and the show.
And that's important, isn't it? To keep I mean, you're never going to stop learning with this sort of thing. And with some comedy teachers, they've stopped doing it, and they've not got. You need that both, because things change, don't they? People, you already said that the people that are doing now are very different to who you were in your time. So the teachings that you had would work then. Yeah, never mind.
No, I didn't know that I was going to. I didn't know the humble part, that the humiliating part. My students came to the show and went, it was not a great, it was not written as a great clowning role. And I did fine. I was good. But I saw the guy who took it over from me, about 2 years after I left. They brought me into Paris to help to do a workshop. And I saw him. And at first, when he'd taken over, I was like, but he'd been doing it for a few years. He had found all this stuff that I totally missed, like these beautiful little moments that seemed so obvious. 500 shows, and I didn't figure them out. Oh boy, okay.
It's a bit like, is it a bit like a cooking recipe and it changing over the years? So like, no, fish and chips, like you've been making it for 50 years and you get a new pup in, different angle. He's figured out, right, baked beans add a bit of different taste to it.
Very much so. Yeah, exactly. And this guy was my age. He came from an acting background in a different way than I did. And he'd been with Cirque du Soleil for many years, so he didn't have to. But man, he had figured out these gorgeous little details. Yes, it's like, just let's put a little more salt in towards the end, not at the beginning, whatever it is. But it was really that subtle. But we're in Paris, tough audience. And he was getting huge, beautiful laughs on the subtlest little moves.
And is that part of the Cirque du Soleil thing as a whole? Because I hear this about Cirque du Soleil. They revolutionized circus, I hear, because they focus less. I don't know the full story about Cirque du Soleil, but I read a book called Blue Ocean Strategy where it talks about revolutionizing the industry, and it said that they were different to the rest of the circus industry because the circus industry was going down and down, and that they focused more on like the corporate side of circuses rather than just the kids, and that's what helped them to catapult to where they are today.
I work as a business consultant as well, a communications consultant in business. So there's always those Cirque du Soleil, profiles in business that that's the second most known brand in the world, second to Harley Davidson, and then there's these case studies. I've read some of them and they're interesting. I would say your premise is right. Cirque du Soleil did a lot of things differently. They certainly focused on a corporate side. They also got lots of money from the Canadian government, which sponsors arts at a level that Americans can only dream of. People from the US can only dream of. Those North Americans in Canada don't dream of it. They get it. I just finished writing a book about the Nanjing, China connection, which I've been talking with you about. My trainer, Louis, came to San Francisco in 1990. So it's the affair, it's the circus affair between Nanjing, China and San Francisco that changed circus in the United States a lot. In that, I quote one of the women who started Pickle Family Circus of saying that when Cirque du Soleil made their big play into the US at the Olympic Arts Festival in Los Angeles in 1984, they got $4 million from the Canadian government. I don't know if that's true. That's quoting someone else, but they got a lot of money to do that. And the Pickle Family Circus started with a loan of $4,000, and pretty quickly got wiped out by this huge tent, and didn't get wiped out, but a big challenge by this huge tent, and a lot of money coming in. They have a whole division that does corporate gigs. Their brand name, they have made very careful, is very big, and it creates a lot of money. They also used Broadway style choreography and lighting, and they brought in directors who could shine it up and slick it up. And then it seems odd, but they kept their ticket prices really high. And that worked. They also, to their credit, told the rest of us in the circus world, this is before I worked with them, we're never going to go down to a $35, $50 ticket, which was great because it let us know, okay, we can build in that range. Because if Cirque du Soleil was going to go with the $175 ticket and then the $500 premium ticket and was going to set out a show at a $50 ticket, we were dead. They said, no, we're not interested in that. We're going to stay where we are. And they have. They went bankrupt. They've come back from it, but and then now they have all these co-productions with the casinos, but also now on cruise ships. And it's really an interesting approach that they've taken.
So sticking to their guns.
Yeah. And circus really wasn't going down. I know that's what all those case studies say. And I know that's circus, for many people they think of in the United States, they think of Ringling Brothers only, Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey. And they did stop. They're back again, but they did stop, and it was a bunch of different factors. But circus has been vibrant here for many years. It's just that the people who were writing those case studies weren't looking they weren't looking at some of the smaller groups where the innovation was really happening, and had huge followings. It's just maybe huge followings in small towns.
Oh, I see. Yeah. But though the followings, they're not they're a bit smaller than you would see in, but they're big, they're loyal and really big
Right.
communities, which are able to make
Cirque du Soleil has, you know, I think I figured out 2 million people saw me perform with Cirque du Soleil. That's a lot of people.
Whoa.
It's a lot of eyeballs looking at your body. And I had to do one scene in a really funky 19th century bathing suit where it wasn't fun to look at. Anyway, we won't go into that. But that's a lot of people. So that you're right. That's more in 500 shows than the 4,000 other shows I've done put together. So yes, in terms of numbers, but in terms of the art form, in terms of the skills, in terms of the look, you know, Bill Irwin never worked with Cirque du Soleil, and he changed the art form of clowning. Joan Mencken never worked with Cirque du Soleil, and she changed the art form. Jeff Hoyle did. He did not have a great time with it. Mookie Cornish did. Mookie Cornish is Canadian, but she did. But she's made most of her changes outside of Cirque du Soleil and has revolutionized the form.
So a lot of those case studies are misinformed.
Well, it's a business case study. So they're looking at the books. They're looking at that. So they're not taking in the whole picture. Some of the business case studies I read, I didn't think were accurate, but I didn't have the facts. It just, you know, I worked there for a while. So I could say a few things like, you might want to look into this thing. But, you know, when I talk about something I'm not part of, I'm sure I either idolize it or vilify it in some way that is way removed from the facts. And Cirque du Soleil is a big company that people think they know, including me, and we don't. We have our experiences.
Okay. Well, that's very interesting. That's bloody, yeah. And with all of the experience you've had in clowning, like you've written 3 books on it, right?
Yes.
What how did you change? You mentioned a bit of it from your conversation with Barnaby.
Yeah.
This is a completely different pod. What were your experiences in building each of those 3 books? And yeah, just tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, I've written 20 plays, so I like being a playwright. I know that form. I never had an interest in writing books, but I did know that when I was going on the Cirque du Soleil tour that was going to be an interesting year, and I knew it was a year plus because it was the length of the contract. But I said this is going to be an interesting year, so keep a journal. I kept a journal. It was a really interesting year. I kept a journal and I started to write a book about it. And it was so boring. I couldn't do any rewrites because said, this is not good. A boring book about clowning. So I put that away. I said, okay, I left my school and I thought for 10 years, we really found something great. I have a lot of my ex-students are some of the really great performers, mainly clowns, but also in theater and acrobats. And so we being the faculty and the students and myself, learned a lot. Let me write that book. And that was so boring, I couldn't even write it because I was going from lesson plans. Said, this is not good. But there's Konstantin Stanislavski wrote 3 of the famous books about theater, and he wrote them as novels from the student's point of view. And I've read them and enjoyed them. And one of them, the Building a Character, really is a lot about clowning. I used a lot of that in the clown work. Not surprisingly, circus is huge in Russia and Stanislavski and Meyer Holden, they were all influenced by circus as well as theater. So I said, ooh, I'll do a split book. I'll take one part of the book is from the student's point of view, and that's where we'll get in the curriculum, the student going through the curriculum like Stanislavski, and the other will be my adventures, the director, on Cirque du Soleil. So that was the first book, is back and forth between these points of view. And it worked. It's a book that you follow. It's an easy read. Quite a few people have said, I was crying by the end because you're connected with the characters. And I give it to, like, I'm teaching a master class in clowning in a month or two, and I'll give each student that book saying, this is what we've been talking about. So it works like a textbook. It took me 10 years to write that. 7 years I thought it was written, then I hired a brilliant editor. I thought an editor just corrects your grammar and spelling, and he took the book and he read through it and went, Jeff, I think we can work together. This is a wonderful outline. And I said, what? So no, it's a wonderful outline. And I said, oh, but in 6 months, he essentially gave me a college course in how to write a novel, just step by step by step by step. And he worked like my acrobatic trainer worked. Pa-boom, pa-boom, pa-boom. Get back to it, get back to it, back to it. Keep going, keep going. And so in a couple of years, I got that book. I wrote the next book because then I loved writing. Then I was excited. I knew what I was doing. And the next book only took me a year, and I decided to go back in my career when I used to tour to Alaska in the middle of winter. And you obviously saw that because there's something really inherently exciting about traveling in small planes in sub-zero weather. It's life and death for real. And you're in a part of America that no one knows. There's no hotels in an Eskimo village. No one goes there. You have to fly in, and no one goes in winter when it's down to 113 degrees Fahrenheit below zero. And so I knew that was good. And then I put that together with a little later, I toured that play I was talking about my father and the Holocaust in the heartland of the United States in Nebraska, where I was in a diversity program because to be Jewish in the heartland is to be diverse. And those were all stories of a stranger in a strange land. What happens when an artist gets hired to go to some strange place to bring their art and finds out maybe they're the least interesting person there, that, there's a whole lot of art there already. There's a whole lot. And then I put it down, and then I decided I had the idea for beginning and ending of a book. And it's called Love, Death, Circus. And the beginning was this moment at a memorial service for the woman I ran my school with, who I co-founded it, who'd been a Ringling clown. And she'd gotten lung cancer when she was on Ringling in her 20s. She got treatment for it, radiation. She was fine, but then the radiation treatment hardened her lungs, and she slowly died as we ran the school together. And then I knew the ending, which was we did a memorial or a benefit for Joan Mencken, one of the great clowns, got dementia and ALS at the same time in her 70s. And we did a show at a big theater, the ACT Theater. I forget what they're calling it now. It was called the Geary, but it's a new name. So it's a big, beautiful theater. And she'd worked there a lot, and they gave us the theater on a Monday night in the middle of Bill Irwin and David Shiner's run. So we were there on their night off. We filled the theater, and we did it really fast so that Joan could perform, even though she had dementia, but she could still perform. And it just was an amazing evening. So I knew I had the beginning and the end, and the book became about how a community, my community here, who live on great bodies that work hard and lots of jokes. What happens when people get sick, get dementia, start to die? And what we do is we take care of each other, actually. We have benefits. We change diapers. We do what needs to be done. And I thought that was something that other people don't get to be part of. I just assume it because it's been my life. But and so it actually worked out to be a nice book. It's a hard book. There's lots of very funny stuff in it. I tried to have an outrageous, you're asking about outrageous clowning. I tried to be a little bit outrageous writer because I knew it was also going to come. The 49% tragedy was built in. I didn't need to work for that.
I've heard a few things about it as well, and I'm going to do an interview on it about also with comedy as well, like clowning and comedy is used to help pensioners and people that are ill. And I'm looking to look more into that. I find that very intriguing.
There's a whole world now of healthcare clowning and a whole world of it's called Clowns Without Borders, who go to refugee camps and places that are not in crisis, but after the crisis when, yeah, it's actually a big part of clowning, this kind of clowning, not in a stage setting necessarily, but in a setting of care.
Yeah, it's very intriguing. It's the thing that I find interesting about that is I hear stories about how, and even had this at a comedy gig, and I hear this from comedians. I haven't heard this enough from clowns, but I'm gonna. But I hear about how when someone's close to terminally ill, like it'll look like they're not having a good time, but when you speak to a loved one, they'll say, "Oh, this person's suffering this and that," and you helped made their day. Like a guy that came to one of my gigs, he was terminal cancer, but no one knew that. He was acting very tense and awkward, but he ended up being a very funny audience member. And at the end, like I asked him how he was, and he says, "In the bit, I was in pain, but I asked how you feeling now after the show." And he said, "I felt a little bit better." And then his friends came and said to us and said, "You really helped make his day, and he won't be with us soon." But I mean, with comedy and entertainment, you get to help people's lives.
Yeah, yeah. You don't always get to hear about it on the back end. That's, because you remember, you're not going to forget that. And I can think of the people, folks who in memory care units who I was medical clowning with, who got up and danced, and they said, they haven't been out of their wheelchair in X time, or all these other things that, yeah, it's a part of the world, that a part of life, dying, illness, dying, that everyone's like, oh, please. But there's a lot of beauty there.
You get, I think you get appreciation for, yeah.
And to be a member of when you have cancer and you're dying and you're in pain, to be a member of an audience laughing at this guy, this young guy who's out there cracking wise, you feel like yourself for a minute. Like, and yeah, that's great.
Now, to anyone that's listening now to the podcast, like, Jeff, he's the man. I want him to teach me about clowning. I want to find out about the clown world. I want him to do a show for me in Edinburgh. How do they get in contact with you? or obviously the Edmund Fringe as well.
Oh man, it's pretty easy. JeffRaz.com is one way, but I'm also pretty prevalent on Facebook and on LinkedIn, because I have a consulting world as well. But JeffRaz.com or SecretLifeOfClowns.com, and you can find me in any of those places.
Right. So you know where to find out about Jeff. I'll also give you his address.
Just come on over, everybody.
Hope you've enjoyed this episode. Next episode, we're going to talk to Dan Leese, who's the clown director for shows in Edinburgh. I'll see you guys at next episode. Take care, guys.